I think people are kind of fascinated by tragedy.
You're on an airplane, something happens, probability is you're not going to survive. We were primarily tasked with recovering crash victims. We had about, a dozen or so body bags filled with dead people on the stern of the ship. But we're all up in the bow, having a nice time and having a burger. And it was sort of a strange juxtaposition of things.
I think it reminds us of just how frail we are as a species, but how we've kind of given ourselves to the technology and we trust in it in a way that maybe we shouldn't, or at least hold it to a higher standard. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the CHAD PRATHER Show. This is fascinating. I'm ready to get into this conversation. I've been looking forward to it. This is cool stuff. You know, I think people are kind of fascinated by tragedy. I don't know what that is. It's part of the human condition where we just see, major disasters that happen and the mysteries that surround all of those events, and we try to unravel them. Conspiracy theories are birthed out of them. We just want to know, and I think part of it is just being part of the connected human thread, and we realize that a lot of things could happen to any of us at any given time, and we want to know. We just want to know. We're inquisitive people, and I'm happy today to welcome to the show a gentleman by the name of Curt Newport. He's got a new book. It's called Ready to Dive, 5 Decades of Adventure in the Abyss. Welcome to the show, Curt. You've spent a lot of time underwater, man.
Well, not so much time underwater, although I have been underwater. I did 2 dives of 4,800 meters in Mir 1, and I was a diver for a while and did some work with some Nekton manned submersibles. But, when you get down to the deep stuff, it's all mostly remote work.
Remote work, yeah. I'm fascinated by that. I can remember as a kid, the mysteries, obviously, the big story was surrounding, would anybody ever find the Titanic, right? And then there was always that story that, people, they finally discovered it, and the debris fields and the 2 parts of the ship that were broken apart. They're still telling that story, right? There's so many things that are mysterious about different events that have happened with tragedy, disasters, everything from airplanes crashing and going into the sea and sunken ships and so on. And we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Titan submersible that, of course, imploded. I want to talk to you about that a little bit because June that'll be a year that's happened. It's amazing how time flies. And that we were all kind of glued to our devices on that, trying to figure out what was going on and what was happening. We'll get to that in a minute. How did you get into that world? I mean, that's fascinating to me. There's so many questions I want to ask you, and I want to ask the right questions, but how did you come about? Like, how does someone get into that type of work of salvage and rescue and finding some of these deep sea mysteries that were out there?
Well, really, bottom line is I kind of got into it by accident. I always had an interest in underwater exploration or deep submergence vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
When I was like 12 or 13 years old, I read all these books about guys like John Holland. And I was just fascinated by the technology that was going to be used to go underwater. And so I used to design submarines when I was like 13 years old. I built my own breathing apparatus for going underwater. And then I guess when I was about 25, I was out of work looking for a job and saw an ad in the Washington Post looking for diving systems technicians for a company called Ocean Systems. And they had a shop out in Chantilly, Virginia, right across the street from Redskin Park. And so I went down there and talked to the guy that ran the shop, and I got the job. And I spent about 1.5 years building ship fenders. These big pieces of foam that you glue together, and they go between the ships and the docks.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't quite what I was hoping for, but, I kind of stuck with it. And that was for $3.50 an hour, by the way.
Wow.
And then I eventually graduated to building and testing deep saturation diving systems. And that was also in Chantilly. And then later on, they moved their shop down to Houston, out west west of town on the Katy Parkway, and I helped build the first commercial 1,500-foot diving system. And I did that for a while. Really wasn't making much money, and I decided, well, the only guys that make money are the divers. So I left Ocean Systems, went to the Commercial Diving Center in California, learned how to be a commercial diver with air and mixed gas, and then basically right when I graduated, Ocean Systems hired me back to be part of their first remotely operated vehicle team. And so I started from there, mostly doing oil field work in the Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea. And then went on to do a lot of submarine cable work with AT&T, Teleglobe, Cable and Wireless, people like that. And then eventually went on to do deep ocean search and recovery. And I pretty much worked on the same Navy contract for decades. It was just held by different companies, Initially it was Ocean Search, and then it was Eastport International, and then they lost the contract to Oceaneering Incorporated, and then Phoenix International got the contract, and I worked for them for like 20 years, and just sort of deep ocean search and recovery on an international basis. We primarily did the deep stuff, anything beyond diver depth, like 200 or 300 feet.
Yeah.
Because we had the equipment to do that.
Hey guys, for 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been America's only Christian wireless service provider. When I say the only ones, they are the only ones, and I'm so proud of them as my friends and partners for this show. Patriot Mobile offers dependable nationwide coverage, and they're going to give you the ability to access all three major networks. So if you're used to a certain coverage, you can keep that same coverage, but you can also use Patriot Mobile and not fund all of these big companies that send a portion of your bill to leftist causes. So if you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're sending a message that you support free speech, religious freedom, the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, our military, veterans, first responder heroes. 100% U.S.-based customer service team makes switching easy. They will even give you free activation when you use promo code CHAD. You can keep your phone. You can keep your number. You can upgrade. They'll help you do that, but they will find the best plan for your family and for your needs. Go to patriotmobile.com/Chad or call them 972-PATRIOT, 972-PATRIOT, or give them a call or check them out online, I should say, patriotmobile.com/Chad. Join me and make the switch today. Yeah, and I was recently on a cruise. It just in sheer layman's terms, if you've ever been on a cruise ship, or you've been on an airplane and you're flying over the ocean, you think something big is going on here. Like nothing makes you feel more finite than being out over the middle of the sea. You just realize how small you are, and there really is this whole world underneath you that you can't see. You talk about going miles deep. It's incredible, this place where human beings can't exist, they can't survive, and even the technology can't reach. So when you get into that, it's fascinating. It's opening up a whole new universe, right?
I've actually never been on a cruise ship.
Don't do it. If you haven't done it at this point, Curt, don't do it. It's overrated, buddy.
I've been on plenty of ships, but they usually work boats like fleet tugs, TATF class, combat salvage vessels, ARS class, a lot of commercial vessels. It's like, if you're like a Greyhound bus driver, you don't go on a vacation by going on a bus trip. It's like, yeah, I've been on plenty of ships, never been on a cruise ship. I'm sure they're very nice, but never done that.
Overrated.
And the funny thing about flying is, I remember I did a job. My first big salvage job was in 1985. It was on Air India Flight 182. It was a Boeing 747 that was brought down by Sikh terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still the worst air disaster at sea. And I was on that job for 5.5 months. I was only supposed to be gone for 10 days. But, I was single, didn't really have any responsibilities. So I stayed there for 5.5 months. And I remember when I flew home, I was sitting on this Boeing 747, and I was sitting right at the place where that aircraft called the Kanishka had broken in half. I'm like, yeah, well, if it happens, it happens. I mean, there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah. I remember you talking about airline tragedies, and you worked specifically, at least with some of the wreckage. And correct me where I'm wrong on this, because like I said, I'm fascinated by this, but I don't necessarily know the questions I ask in the right way. But the TWA 800, which came down over, Long Island, which again, there was a lot of mystery, a lot of speculation on that. Was it shot down? Was there, what happened to there were some pretty descriptive things that came out about that crash, and books have been written about it, fiction as well as nonfiction. A lot of speculation that's out there. My friend Nelson DeMille wrote a book, I believe the name of it was Nightfall, specifically about that, from a fiction perspective, but it was interesting, very eye-opening. But you worked on that. I mean, was that like immediately after that crash? Was it some time had passed and then it becomes a reclamation thing, or how do you get involved with something like that? And then what happened with it?
It was pretty quick. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were involved almost immediately. It's like the plane went down. I mean, we had assets up there in a matter of days. And the initial thing they were doing was to recover the remains of the passengers.
Sure.
So I worked on 3 different ships on that job. I worked on the USS Grass, and we were recovering human remains. And that was using we had a small vehicle called the MR-1. And what I would do is fly the vehicle down until I found a deceased passenger. And then I would stay there. Divers would go down, follow the umbilical down, and then they would grab the person and bring them back on deck and put them in body bags. And then later on, I worked on a ship called the USS Grapple. And we were more in the debris field of smaller parts of the aircraft, just kind of clearing the area. Then I also worked on another ship whose name escapes me. But it was pretty grueling work. I mean, because we're working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the worst part was the crew on the ship hated us because where they berthed us, they put us in these temporary bunks in their rec lounge where they did recreation. And so then they couldn't do that anymore. So they were all pissed off at us. And then every morning about 9:30, there'd be some guy dragging a fuel hose to fill a diesel fuel tank in our room. And we got people in there trying to sleep 24/7. And so you never really got much rest. And there was also a computer training room in the back. People were coming there to do their training. And so it was kind of difficult. And what was funny is we had a cookout one day up in the bow of the ship. This was on the Grasp. And so we got this cookout going. We got burgers and hot dogs and stuff like that. And on the stern of the ship, we had about, a dozen or so body bags filled with dead people on the stern of the ship. But we're all up in the bow, having a nice time, having a burger. And it was sort of a strange juxtaposition of things, like stern of the ship, death.
Yeah.
Bow of the ship, life. It was kind of weird. But, we got the job done. We were working this one main wreckage pile. It was probably, 10 or 15 feet above the mud line, maybe 150 feet in diameter. Just this pile of shards of aluminum, people, passenger seats, you name it. It's just there. And we're just picking it apart, trying to find passengers and bring them up. So it's kind of depressing.
Hey guys, the question about the next stock market crash isn't a matter of if, but really it's a matter of when. There are just too many signs that we are on the edge of some really tough economic times. We've got war on multiple fronts, movement away from the U.S. dollar on the international stage, a weakened job market, and a recent surge in stock prices that isn't really backed by anything other than investor overconfidence. Now, what's going on right now, it just isn't sustainable. And when it starts to crumble, it could all come down very, very fast. Now, when the stock market crash comes, Wouldn't you rather be a week or a month too early rather than a minute too late? That's why my friends over at United Patriot Coin are offering to help Americans rebalance their portfolios and prepare for the coming market crash by investing in precious metals. They've always been able to help you protect your liquid assets, but now they can help with funds in your IRA or your 401k retirement account also. There's a little-known law that allows Americans to own physical precious metals inside of an official IRA account. This isn't gold, stocks, or shares in some random mining company. We're talking about actual gold and silver coins and bars. Now, the metals you put in your IRA are the exact same ones you're going to get out when you take a distribution. You can even buy and sell within your IRA without the messy tax issues you have with other transactions. So the experts at United Patriot Coin can help you through the entire process, from opening and funding the accounts to selecting the best metals to put into it. I want you to visit UnitedPatriotCoin.com or call their office right here in Texas, 844-202-7834. As a special bonus, tell them Chad Prather sent you, and they will cover your setup fees on qualifying accounts. Remember, go get precious metals in your IRA rollover guide and use it. Check it out, UnitedPatriotCoin.com, 844-202-7834. Yeah, I can only imagine. And I mean, the things that you find in just the representation of human life, not only the remains, but their belongings. I can only imagine not only the morbidity of that, but just the gut-wrenching task of that. Like you said, you're tired. And I'm assuming, like, when they bring these ships in, I mean, I'm assuming these are just ships that are in the area where you guys can kind of station and do your work off of that they don't normally do that. Would that be correct? Or did they bring them in for that purpose?
No, we came in from the base at Little Creek on the Grasp and Grapple. I mean, basically, when this plane went down, everybody came there. I mean, NOAA, the Navy, whoever, Coast Guard, everybody converged on the area. And we were primarily tasked with recovering crash victims. And when you talk about the belongings of people, I remember they recovered this teenage girl once, and we're kind of like on deck looking through her belongings, and I'm looking at her passport, credit cards, and I'm like, well, I don't think she thought she'd be here today.
Yeah.
It was really sad.
Yeah.
But, it happens, and yeah, I don't really like flying anymore because of that stuff. I mean, because I don't know. I don't have a lot of confidence left in airline safety. I'll just put it that way.
No, I agree with you. As someone who has to fly a lot, and I'm getting on an airplane tomorrow, so I'm constantly in touch with that reality. And these days, and I have a lot of friends in the airline industry as well who are either still in it or retired, and they just kind of shake their head at the conditions of what's going on, not only with the manufacturers, but with the maintenance, with the individual airlines themselves, and the various quality control that's happening these days. It's kind of scary.
The bottom line is, if you're on an airplane, something happens, the probability is you're not going to survive.
Right.
I mean, it's just the reality of it. And yeah, I don't like airplanes.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Well, you're in a pressurized metal tube at 32,000 feet, breathing through a HEPA filter, sitting on top of each other, and you're at somebody else's mercy, really, in terms of, are they qualified, are they capable, and did the right bolt get screwed in?
Not only that, you don't know if this, maybe this guy had a bad day. He had a fight with his wife or something like that. He's not paying attention to things. I mean, you're just at the mercy of like three guys in the front of the airplane, and I don't like that.
Yeah, it's a good point. You're definitely out of control. It's not, and I remember, a number of years ago when that Egypt air crash happened, and the guy basically just committed suicide. I mean, he just took the plane down. And obviously they leveled off for a minute, but then he took it on down. I mean, you're at somebody else's mercy. It's scary. But you ever think about that, though? You look at that, and people are fascinated with the tragedy stuff. I mean, it makes a wild story, a crazy story, and I think it reminds us of just how frail we are as a species, but how we've kind of given ourselves to the technology, and we trust in it in a way that maybe we shouldn't, or at least hold it to a higher standard, right? And you've been in the front row of so much of this, salvage, wreckage, recovery process that, I mean, I can only imagine the stories that are there. And by the way, I want to ask you, did you ever form an opinion on how TWA 800 came down? Did you ever have a thought on that?
Yeah, there were a lot of eyewitness reports of surface missiles and things like that. But, I really kind of think that it was pretty much as the NTSB said, that, they had a fuel tank, center fuel tank that was almost empty.
Yeah.
And there was probably a malfunction in the wire. In fact, we spent a lot of time looking for the fuel pump that was in that tank. We never found it. It's a tiny little thing, and we looked for it, but we didn't find it. But I kind of think that's probably what happened.
Yeah, my memory may be deceiving me, but I seem to remember that they pretty much put that plane all back together, if I remember right, when they got all the wreckage, or they at least laid it out quite extensively. I think I remember the images of that. I mean, that could be, again, my brain could be deceiving me on that.
No, that's exactly right. And that's actually a technique for crash investigation that was developed by the British a long time ago, I think back in the 1950s, where you take the aircraft and you essentially take all the parts and put it back together on some sort of frame, and it gives you a better understanding of how the thing came apart.
Yeah.
So the British were really good about doing that.
That's it's wild. And again, I take it back to just the vast galaxy underwater that's there. When we start talking about the depths and the pressures that are there, and just the inability for humans to be able to get to certain depths, I think to me, I think it was amazingly groundbreaking in finding the Titanic. And now it seems like they, there for a while at least, they were making regular, if nothing else, robotic, trips to the Titanic, right? I mean, how much has that technology evolved over the last 100 years, really, to be able to say, okay, this is unsearchable, unfindable, to now it's a reasonably seemingly routine thing? Or is it routine at all?
Well, everything is findable if you have enough money.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
On the Titanic, I actually piloted the first ROV that ever dove on it. I mean, Ballard had been down there with the Woods Hole submersible, and they had flown a small vehicle off from the Woods Hole submersible, but they weren't controlled from the service. And we actually went out there with the Magellan 725 and dove on the wreck, and that was the first time a true ROV had been on the wreck.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a lot of fun, sort of like a little playground. You run and fly around the ship. And I remember I was flying a Magellan 725 around the ship on the bow section, and the project was being produced by MSNBC, and there was a producer on there who wanted like a really killer shot for the trailers. So they told me, okay, we want you to go up to the bow section and get right on the edge of the bow and fly up really fast and pop up above the deck, because that would give them the shot they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that a few times, and I was either too slow or too far away or something like that. They didn't like it. So eventually I said, okay, screw this. I put this vehicle like right on the edge of the bow, and I started coming up really fast. And everybody was sort of like freaking out. And I was so close to the bow, there was a towing shackle on the front of the Titanic, and I actually brushed that towing shackle with the lens of this camera that we had been borrowed from Woods Hole. And I just popped up above the bow. There's all these little particles of sediment falling off, and, well, they got their shot,
Yeah.
But Titanic was a pretty cool wreck. It was always one of my dreams or goals, to dive on it, and I got to do that, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey, guys, the world may be going down in flames, but it's not going to get me down. It's not going to depress me. Nope, absolutely not. It may be a complete disaster out there with all these Bidenomics and all the crazy stuff happening in our world, but it's not going to ruin my day. You know why? Because I started my day with a really good, dark cup of coffee, and it was delicious. It is an America First cup of coffee from Blackout Coffee. Man, I'm so proud to partner with these guys. Their coffee is 100% American, 0% grift. Blackout Coffee is 100% committed to conservative values. They source the beans, the roasting process, the customer support and shipping. Everything they do embodies the true American spirit, the hardworking values, and they accept no compromise on taste or quality. I'm telling you something. When you see this cup sitting on this table, it is filled with Blackout coffee. I love it so much. I may be drinking too much of it. We'll see, but it's delicious. Listen, I want you to support small businesses across the country that have the same values you do, and Blackout Coffee is one of those companies. So I want you to check them out and see what you think. Listen, not only they're American first, they're family-owned. So I want you to go to blackoutcoffee.com/Chad, and right now, if you use promo code CHAD, I spell it Chad, you're going to get 20% off your first order. That's blackoutcoffee.com/Chad. Use promo code Chad. One more time, blackoutcoffee.com/Chad. Use that promo code Chad. I mean, obviously, that's a story. And again, it's I go back to the tragic events of history. There's so many conspiracies around that, was it really the Titanic, or was it brought down on purpose? I mean, you could deep dive in all of this stuff. It's interesting to me how whenever there's mysteries surrounding certain tragic events of human history, that wherever there seems to be a vacuum, that our minds and our imaginations and our questions, and they just kind of rush to fill that void. And there's so many things. And so we're just kind of constantly on this quest, this search. And so it fascinates me. I was different excerpts in your book. And we certainly don't want to give away the book. Everybody needs to get a hold of this book and read it, because if this fascinates you like it does me, I mean, your anecdotes and just your stories in this are incredible, and you've got tons in each chapter. But I was read through this deal, and I saw your takes on what you did in terms of the USS Indianapolis, and I was like, hey, that's from the movie Jaws. If people don't remember, Quinn is sitting on the boat, and he starts pontificating about the night the USS Indianapolis goes down, and he's telling them that he was on it, and all the men were getting eaten by sharks and things like this. Steven Spielberg's telling this through Jaws, and it's a compelling thing because the Indianapolis was, of course, carrying certain aspects of the bomb, right? And or it was a little boy.
Yeah, it was carrying the plutonium core to the little boy bomb, the plutonium. The uranium bomb.
Mm. So I mean, this is obviously years after this happens, right? You got involved with that. What happened with that? What were you doing on that project?
Well, we had a search funded by the Discovery Channel in 2000. We went out and searched the area, had a lot of technical problems. The terrain was far worse than we thought it would be, because at that time, this was in 2000, didn't really have a lot of bathymetric data on where the Indianapolis sank. So we didn't find it. We searched about, 350, 400 square miles. And then in 2017, I was asked to be a consultant to Paul Allen to do an expedition to look for the Indianapolis, because of the fact that I had been there before, I'd done a lot of research and knew a lot about it. So I was hired by him, and we went out 2017 on the research vessel Petrel, and we had a RMS 6000 AUV. And, the thing is, I mean, there was very little navigational data on where the Indianapolis actually sank. There was a position, but as it later turned out, it was off by over 30 nautical miles. So it wasn't even within our search area. We were looking for it in 2000. But what happened was, when the Indianapolis was steaming west on the petty route to Leyte Gulf, they passed an LST, and somebody managed to figure out the identity of that LST, and that gave us a position fix on where it was at a particular point in time. And from there, we were able to extrapolate out and figure out where the ship likely was when it sank. Where the ship was actually found was about, 10 miles from where I thought it was, which, I mean, I guess in the overall scheme of things isn't too bad.
Pretty precise. I mean, you were searching on space the size of Oklahoma. I mean,
it was big. I mean,
300 square miles, that's a big spot.
Oh, the Petrel searched a much larger area than that. And the thing is, for that ship to be found, it took somebody like Paul Allen with deep pockets and he basically decided that, okay, we're going to we're going to go out and find this ship. I don't care how much it costs. We're going to keep searching until we find it. And in fact, there was a phone call between him and the head of the Naval Heritage Command. And Robert Kraft, the head of Marine Operations, told him, said, well, we're going to go look for the Indianapolis. And the guy at the head of the Heritage Command, I can't remember his name, he said, well, how long are you going to look for it? He goes, well, until we either find it or I'm directed to do something else.
Wow.
So he just said he didn't care how much it costs. You know, and the guy was worth, I don't know, what, $16 billion or something. Yeah, we're going to go find this ship. And that's really what it took, is for somebody like Paul Allen to say, I don't care what it costs, we're going to go find it. And I'm glad he did that.
Yeah, same. And, you know, I mean, that's, for those of you who don't know, you should study up on that. I mean, that was a major World War II tragedy. I mean, so many lives were lost. The boat, you know, turned over on its side. A lot of the life jackets and everything else just floated off. And you know.
Oh, it was the worst loss of life in the history of the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
And the problem with the life jackets, these were Kapok life jackets. They only maintain buoyancy for like 48 hours. Mm-hmm. And after that, they don't float so well. So after a couple of days, it didn't matter if you had a life jacket or not.
Wow.
It was going to be very difficult to stay above water. And we got a complement of 1,150 men or 1,200 men, 327 survivors.
Yeah.
And they were found by accident by a guy flying a Lockheed Ventura doing anti-submarine patrol. He wasn't even looking for them, and they were found by accident. He said, hey, I got a bunch of these guys in the water. There's an oil slick. And if he had not found them on that day, it was like 4 or 5 days later, there wouldn't have been any survivors.
That's amazing. And I mean, just the sheer terror that those men had to have gone through, not only, I mean, just seeing the loss of life that they saw, but just what they were up against, like you said. I mean, you're treading water, there's sharks, and you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which I don't know if anybody's checked lately, but that's a pretty big spot. That's a reasonably large area to be lost. And so, you know, it kind of makes you wonder, you know, how many mysteries are still out there. There's a lot of them, and who just haven't come along with those deep pockets to say, we want to take a look at this. Another one of the stories that fascinates me, of course, is Liberty Bell 7, you know, from Gemini 3, Gus Grissom. Of course, you know, anybody that's ever seen that movie, The Right Stuff, I refer everything to some Hollywood telling of it. You know, the capsule, the hatch blew, and it sinks, and of course they lose the ability to do their research on that Liberty Bell 7 capsule. And of course, Gus Grissom died later on in the Apollo 1 with the igniting of the fire inside the capsule on the launch pad. But you got involved with the reclamation of that, too. That wasn't found for, what, 38, 40 years after that capsule sank, right?
It was 38 years.
Wow.
In fact, we brought it back to Port Canaveral 38 years to the day after it was lost. And I can't even explain to you why I pursued that for so long. I think I worked on that project for 14 years.
Wow.
I just thought it would be a really fun thing to do. And once I had completed my research, then it was a problem of finding someone to pay for it.
Yeah.
And eventually we did. And, you know, we got lucky. I mean, we only had 24 square mile search area, which isn't very big when you get, you know, 90 nautical miles from the nearest land.
Yeah.
And given the technology they had in 1961 to track the spacecraft. But it was within our search area. It was about 1/2 mile in from the west, on the western side of our search area. And we found it on the next to last fill-in lines. The fill-in lines, like you do a general search pattern, and then you always look under what's called a nadir of the sonar, which is looking directly underneath the sonar track. And we found it on the next to last fill-in line. And we had 85 sonar contacts after we completed our search. We kind of looked at them and evaluated them, got them down to about 15 that we thought were worth investigating. And Liberty Bell 7 was the first target we dove on. And I just, quite frankly, I just couldn't believe it. Went down, we had problems, the weather was getting bad. The scanning sonar crapped out. Eventually we got it working, and we start seeing this debris going up a hill. We followed it up. Bang. There was a spacecraft. You could see United States, everything. And it looked exactly like I predicted it would look, because I'd done a lot of research on the way it was constructed, and it pretty much looked the way I thought it would look.
What emotion comes over you when you're in the abyss? I mean, you're in darkness. And then all of a sudden, boom! Hey, there's something we recognize. I mean, what kind of aha moment comes over you when that happens?
I was just shocked. I mean, 15 minutes before, like, everything's going to hell, nothing's working. I'm sitting there, got my hands, my face buried in my hands because everything's going bad. And I figure, well, we just spent all this money and we're not going to find anything. And then it's like, just bang, there it is. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable. I just couldn't believe that we had actually pulled it off. And
how deep was it?
It was a little over 16,000 feet.
Wow. And you're looking for something the size of what, a small bathroom?
Yeah, the thing was like 6 feet in diameter, 9 feet tall. I mean, it's small.
Yeah.
People have trouble finding whole shipwrecks. I was trying to find something that was way smaller than one boiler from the Titanic.
Yeah, literally a capsule.
Water. Yeah. So, yeah, it was hard.
And then the process of getting that back up to the surface, how delicate of a process is that? I mean, I'm assuming you don't just stick a winch on it and start hauling it up.
Well, we do kind of, but
yeah.
What I had done in the early 1990s is that I developed these special recovery tools that sort of look like inverted vices. And there was this one area in the capsule where the escape tower attached. And if the escape tower was used, it would pull like 20 G's of acceleration. So I figured, well, that's got to be a really good, strong point in the spacecraft.
Right.
So I designed these tools, and we put them on the top of the capsule after we did the initial survey, and connected on a 3-point sling. And, lift line wasn't even very big. It was about, 5/16 of an inch in diameter. Because the capsule didn't weigh that much. I mean, it was in the launch phase, it was probably 3,500, 4,000 pounds. Splashdown phase was about 2,300 pounds. And I estimated that it weighed about 1,500 pounds in water. But once we had attached those lines, and we had a line going from the capsule to the surface, we just slowly pulled it up, and took a long time, like 5 or 6 hours. I think we started lifting around dinner time, and about 2:30 in the morning, it was at the water surface.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing to me. I can't imagine the anticipation. I mean, I know what it's like to catch a fish, and you want to see it. And now you got to pull that thing up, and you're like, wow, it's like, this is real. This exists.
Yeah, I was a little nervous about it because you're pulling something up from underwater. The ship's going up and down. It's heaving up and down. It means the line goes slack, it goes tight, slack, tight. It's just like catching a fish. And every once in a while I go check the line. It's like, oh man, I don't know if there's anything there or not, but there was. But then as soon as we got the thing on deck, this thing still had live pyrotechnics on it. It had explosive devices. In fact, it had a thing called a SOFAR bomb that was armed but undetonated. It had 11 ounces of HBX in it, which is similar to TNT. So once after we got it back on deck, then we had to have a team, EOD experts, come in and disarm the spacecraft and find this device, which they did fairly quickly, and we chucked it over the side, and then it was safe.
Wow. That's fascinating. I think the speculation of the day was that Grissom had accidentally popped the hatch, right? But it landed on the hatch, if I remember that story correctly, and caused it to open up. Does that sound?
No, I mean, I read all the post-flight debriefings that Grissom had, and at one point in one of the debriefings, he said, well, I don't see I could have hit that button, but possibly I did. But I really think there's a writer named George Leopold who wrote a biography on Grissom, and a guy named Andy Sanders in the UK who is really good at reprocessing film footage. And they came up with this theory that, when helicopters are hovering, they generate a lot of static electricity. And what they theorized was that, the way you covered this capsule is the helicopter had a recovery pole called a pelican hook, and they would use that to attach the recovery line to the top of the capsule. Well, you got this helicopter up there generating a lot of static energy or static electricity. And we think that what happened is when they touched that capsule with that recovery hook, that there was a spark that ignited the explosives on the hatch. Now, the way this hatch worked was there was a plunger, and when you push that plunger in, it would, like a firing pin, like a pistol, it would hit two percussion caps. Well, the percussion caps typically are made from fulminated mercury. You hit them and they go off, and they are very sensitive to static electricity. So what we think happened was that they touch that capsule, static discharge goes down, sets off the percussion caps, and the hatch blows. And I think his footage that he reprocessed kind of supports that theory.
That's amazing. I want to talk about this Titan submersible. That to me is where deep sea and money, where normally you've got a salvage situation and it takes money. I think this is what caused that tragedy, right? Here's somebody with more resources than they had common sense. And everybody was kind of glued to the TV or glued to the news trying to figure out, this, what was it, a crew of 5 or 6 that get on this submersible and go down? Do you recall?
5.
I think it was 5. And I think at that time we all pretty much had it in our mind that they were not alive. What tell me the story of that. Refresh our memories on that deal. They got on this submersible that was crazy safety violations and just not worthy, from what I understand, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name who ran the company.
Yeah, it escapes me as well. I know it, but it escapes me.
Well, he wanted to create a money-making business that would take tourists out to the Titanic or other locations. And the problem was that it wasn't really a good design that was in line with traditional methods that you use to design deep submersible vehicles. They mostly had to do with the materials. It had titanium hemispheres on each end, and in between the titanium hemispheres was a filament-wound carbon fiber. Well, there's not really a lot of data about that type of material being used. I mean, carbon fiber is really strong, especially under tension, but under compression, especially over repeated, tensionings, it's not clear how well it lasts.
Yeah.
And so people would come up and spend, a couple $100,000, $250,000 to go down on this thing. And they got away with it for a while, but then eventually it kind of caught up to them. And the thing is, I knew somebody on that submarine. I knew P.H. Nargelet. And myself, if I was given the opportunity, I don't think I would have gotten in it. I mean, I've been in a submarine. I've been down that deep. I've been deeper. But I was in a Russian submarine. The hull was made out of nickel steel alloy. It had been proven. No worries. I was diving with the head of the program. I didn't have any problem with that. And it was fine. But this thing, he bragged about the fact that he bought this carbon fiber. He got a great deal on this carbon fiber because it was out of date.
Yeah.
It was past its service life. Well, and he was telling his customers that. And I'm like, well, gee, I don't know if I heard that. I'm not sure I'd want to dive into this thing. And the other thing was their method of launching this thing. They had like this pontoon boat. And it's not that hasn't been done before, but that's really not the proper way to launch a deep submersible vehicle. The other thing was they had no rescue capability on their support ship. So if anything happened, they got stuck on the bottom, nobody's going to come and get them. I mean, if you're talking about going down to 6,000 meters, there just aren't vehicles like that just laying around all over the place. I mean, it takes time for them to get there. And even if they had been just trapped on the bottom and still alive, it is doubtful that anybody could have rescued them in time. So it was just a bad design. And hopefully people learn from it.
Curt, you talking about knowing what you know and not wanting to get on there. I don't know anything about it, and I wouldn't have wanted to get on there. I mean, I don't know what the PSI is on that type of, that type of pressure at that type of depth or anywhere close to that, but it's got to be.
It's like, let's see, 12,000 feet, 4,000 or 5,000 PSI.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, you just get immediately squished. I mean, that implosion, it would be instantaneous, right?
It's all over in less than a millisecond. I mean, it's quick. It's so quick, your brain doesn't even have time to register what's happening. And the other thing was, they're on this thing, even if they'd been able to surface, if there was a problem, they came up to the surface, they couldn't even get out of it. I mean, to get in and out of this thing, you had to open up the whole front hemisphere. Well, you can't do that if the thing's in the water. So it was just, in many respects, a really kind of bad design.
Yeah. And just the decision to get on that. Like you said, they got away with it for a little while, but then, here we are. We're coming up on a year of that. And the amazing things that people come up with their brains, whether they're trying to make money or adventure seeking or something like that. I don't know. I don't have that. I don't have that gene inside of me, Curt.
Well, I mean, there's a way to do that sort of thing and do it safely.
Sure.
With a properly designed deep submersible vehicle, but whether you can make any money in it, I don't know. I mean, it's really expensive to operate these things. I mean, when we go on these jobs for the Navy, you get a big, large, dynamically positioned ship. You get all this equipment on it. It's $60,000 to $100,000 a day. So you're gonna have to pay a lot. You're gonna have to have passengers pay a lot to be able to do that and make any money.
Yeah,
which is obviously, I would think, is the ultimate goal. To make money, but you can't do that.
Well, and you retired what, 22? Did I read that?
Yeah.
You're 22. So one of the interesting things that I noticed, when you look up a number of these different things that happened, these tragedies, there's not a lot of name recognition for the people who do what you do and what you have done, right? There's not a lot of people that are listed with who found this or whatever. You just read about it and say, well, they found this. Well, who's they, right? So it's sort of an unsung job from what I've seen. Now, maybe I was reading the wrong stuff. I could be wrong, but it just seems like it was kind of an unsung thing that, for someone of not only the expertise, but the risk involved in finding these things and doing these things.
I mean, you were reading the right stuff. It's just that, when you were working under a Navy contract and when you go out to do a job like this, there's a Navy representative. And if anyone's going to talk to the media, it's going to be him. It's not going to be a guy like me or somebody else. And, it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, one last thing we'll touch on, and I know your time's precious. We'll let you go. I was watching, I'll date myself. I'm 51 years old. I was watching when the Challenger exploded. We were out of school. I think I was in the 5th grade. We were out of school for a snow day, and it happened.
I was in school when JFK got shot. So that's really dating me.
We're gonna date you too. Yeah, yeah. So I was out on a snow day. I was actually home alone, and I watched the Challenger explosion. So forever etched in my memory where I was, what I was doing. And you mentioned JFK. Everybody has those dates of where they were and certain things happened. But you were part of that salvage process as well. Was that's off of what, Cape Canaveral, Florida?
Port Canaveral.
Port Canaveral. So that area, that was that very deep water at that place?
No. Well, the area where the orbiter stuff was only about 80 feet. Scuba diver depth.
Yeah.
If I can remember correctly, the left-hand booster landed on about 600 feet of water. Right-hand booster about 1,300 feet. So no, it wasn't very deep in the overall scheme of things. And I remember I was actually visiting my brother in California, and I was asleep in the morning, and he came in and woke me up and said, "Get up, the space shuttle just blew up."
Wow.
So I get up and watch the TV, and of course they showed this footage, endlessly. And I mean, there's no question in my mind at that time that, no, there's no survivors. And let's see, I had gotten back from the Air India job in '85 in November, and in January they called me up and said, well, we need help. I was down in Florida working on recovering the booster wreckage. We were on a Swedish salvage ship called the Standard Workhorse, and a couple of 50-ton cranes in the stern, and it was perfect. And so I was down there for about 2.5 months.
And I would think that a solid rocket booster that's filled with fuel, that's a pretty volatile situation, right? That's a relatively dangerous reclamation process.
Yeah, well, they did destruct the boosters after they broke off from the main external fuel tank. But the problem was they didn't know how to deal with this. I mean, they didn't have a procedure in place for how to recover booster wreckage that still had propellant on it. And there were several inches of propellant on all of the booster wreckage. So we basically ended up with a ship just stacked with tons of this booster wreckage, and it has all this rocket fuel on it. And what the Air Force told us was that if just one piece of wreckage caught fire, it'd just burn a hole right through the ship and sink the ship. So yeah, we would do that, and then we would offload it periodically at the Trident submarine base. It was an okay job. I mean, we had a lot of problems with our vehicle, but it's always like that.
Well, I can tell you this. We had some major storms down here in Houston in my area 2 weeks ago, and my dining room flooded. That's about all the water I want to deal with, Curt. I had about 4 inches. We had to change the floors out. That's about that's my depths, okay? That's about as far as I want to be when it comes to water and recovery process.
Yeah, I think we got your storms a few hours later.
Yeah, it's like
really hell of a thunderstorm the night before last.
Yeah, you're getting our stuff. It's like going back to the future. You're getting what we had 3 days ago. You're a piece of history, Curt. You really are, man. And I want everybody to get the book. It's published by Purdue. You tons of stories in there, and so many things that are vital to the telling of these stories that are history. And you're a vital part of it, man. Ready to Dive, 5 decades of adventure in the abyss. Curt, I got to tell you don't look that old, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, I feel that old. I got a bad back, and it's from working on ships. In fact, I don't really like the subtitle of the book. The better subtitle would be 50 years of back-breaking work on noisy ships, because man, my back always hurts.
Putting up with shit on a ship.
Oh, that's true more than you know.
I can only imagine. And I got one final question. Have you ever dealt with seasickness? Have you ever had that?
No, it didn't really. I've never really gotten seasick, but there have been a few times where I didn't feel particularly well.
Yeah.
When we were doing the 2000 expedition for the Indianapolis, I don't know, I ate something for dinner and didn't agree with me. 2:00 in the morning, I went up on the rail and I just hurled. I mean, I just spewed. And a few times, when the weather gets really bad, nobody feels well. I don't care what they say.
True.
And if it's really bad, everybody's sick. Whether you vomit or not, that depends upon the individual. But that's the only time I really kind of like spewed at sea.
I'll tell you. Hey, listen, man. I am so glad that we were able to connect. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I want people to get the book Ready to Dive. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us, man.
You're a good guy. I love you, man.
Hey, I appreciate that, Curt, and likewise. This has been fun. I really have. I've been looking forward to conversation because this stuff just fascinates me. So, encourage people to get a hold of the book and read it, devour it, and tell your friends about it. So, thanks, man. Thanks. Are you able to enjoy the retirement, or do you miss it at all? I mean, how are these days handling? Just sitting in traction, deal in the back.
No, I got my spinal twist for that. I got to keep busy. It's like I don't like sitting around. So when I retired, I bought this 1959 Austin Healey sports car.
Nice.
And I've been farting around with that for now 2 years. And I finally got it working pretty well. It's not stranding me. So that's what I'm doing, taking care of that car. I got some black powder rifles I shoot.
Yeah.
And of course, I've been spending a lot of time writing. I don't know. I probably got another book in me, but it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. A lot of people don't realize it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
Tremendous amount of work.
Curt, thank you, man. Get the book, Ready to Dive. It's put out by Purdue. Check it out. You'll enjoy it. For those of you listening, watching, go to where podcasts are offered. Leave us a rating and review. 5 stars is what we deserve. We do appreciate our audience. It's a big audience, and we're thankful for each and every one of you. And thank you, Curt, for coming on the show. And just remind you guys, tell your family and friends about the show. We're always having fun over here, and it's a good time. You never know what you're going to get. So until next time, know that we love you. God bless you. We'll talk to you then. Bye.